Hello and welcome to the seventh video in this file system video tutorial series. My name is David Thorne from Thorne Web Design. Um, okay, so in the previous last six videos, we've talked about how to create, remove, rename directories, also how to create an empty file using touch. And we talked about how to check if a file exists, if a directory is a directory, and so on. So we're going to try and put it all together now and start using fopen. Now fopen is a great function, very versatile, has huge amount of functionality, can do lots and lots of stuff with files. Okay, as you'll find out over the next tutorials. So fopen takes two mandatory arguments: the file name itself, and I want to reiterate the file, and also then the second one is the mode. Which type of are we going to write, are we going to read, are we going to append, and so on to the file. So let's start off by creating a variable with the file that we actually want to create. Now in this instance we're going to be creating a file called fopen.txt with inside of the test folder. Now I'll show you the test folder in a second. So we're just going to say we're going to use get cwd as we've used it in our previous tutorials, and we're going to be creating this one file. Now just to show you in the web browser that I've got it already, and the full URL for it is then youtube.local/test/fopen.txt. Now youtube.local, by the way, is on my server here in-house, therefore you're not going to be able to navigate it to it. Alright, it's not it's just a testing server. Okay, and as you can see here, not found. Alright, so the file does not exist. Okay, so let's continue. So the first thing that I want to do is, if we're going to create this file, I want to check that it doesn't exist already first of all. Okay, because as you'll see later on in this video, fopen can also delete lots of data inside of your file. Okay, so we're going to check that it doesn't exist. Else, if it does exist, we're just going to echo out the file already exists, and this is then going to be, this will be another, whoops, if I can type properly, another tutorial. And once again, tutorial. Okay, so I'll explain this in the forthcoming tutorial. So if the file does not exist, what we want to do is we want to get a file handle, okay, using fopen. Now I'll discuss that in a second. The first argument is the file path or the file name, depending upon whether we're using an absolute path or a relative path. Now in this case we're using an absolute path, so we're using the full path from the root folder all the way down. So we can say then path in here, and the second argument, which we're going to do in this tutorial, is the lowercase w, alright, the single character of w. That's basically saying it's going to write to the file. Now it also means a little bit more than that. It means that it will open the file and set the file pointer back to the beginning of the file, and then truncate any data in the file, and if the file does not exist, it's going to attempt to create it. So in other words, that if the file does exist already, it's going to open the file, it's then going to remove all the data within inside of it, it's going to put the file pointer right back to the beginning again, ready for you to write. Okay. Now if the file doesn't exist, essentially it's creating an empty file. Now I did say if the file does not exist, it will attempt to create the file. That's all down to permissions once again. Therefore that's something which you need to think about, is that first of all this script is able to execute, and also the directory that you're creating files in has the permissions to allow you to create this one file. Okay, that's something else completely to talk about. So if you do get any errors about permission denied, then it's all to do with permissions, which please go off and read somewhere else about permissions. So if fopen is successful, then it will return a file handle. Okay. Now if it fails, it will return false. Therefore at this one point we simply just want to check if handle, so we want to know that it's true. If it's false, then it's going to go down here, and for the time being, we're not interested. Now, a file handle. Let's explain this a little bit further, because if I skip over this, what is a file handle, then you're still going to be a little bit confused about how it works. And essentially, the most important part of fopen is knowing what a file handle is. Now, we're working with software at the moment, PHP, Apache server and so on. It's all software running on the server on the computer. Now, the actual disk itself, is hardware. There's a connection between the two. Now, in between, there's obviously an operating system that's going to deal with communications from the software to then the hardware. Essentially, your PHP code isn't talking directly to the hardware. It's the operating system that is the one that's doing the communications. Now, you are just saying to the operating system, which is then telling the disk itself, hey, I've got some data, and I want you to put this data in a certain place, wherever you want, and I want you to call it this file name within inside of this directory, and so on. Where that one disk puts that information is of no relevance to us, as long as it returns a pointer to the beginning location of that one file. Okay, and anything, if that one file already exists on disks, it's saying, well, just give me the beginning pointer of where it starts so I can rewrite over everything else. Alright, so that's all it's effectively doing, is giving a file pointer to a place on the disk where we can then write data to, bytes of data to. Okay, so now that we know that we've got a handle, when you do have a handle, then it's really important to close that handle as soon as you open it in the code. Alright, because it's good practice to close a handle as soon as you've opened it. Now, naturally, somewhere in here, you would then be doing the writing to the file, which I'm going to save for the next tutorial. So, for the time being, we're just going to close the file straight away, and we're going to check if the file does in fact exist. Okay, and we'll just say path once again. So we're checking that the file exists, and we're going to echo out the file now exists. Alright, so we just want to show you, I would just want to show you for the time being that fopen is working, and it's allowing us to create this file, and then we're checking that the file actually does exist. So let's come to the browser, and as I showed you before, we're going to go to then obviously fopen.txt to show you whether the file exists. And this time, oh sorry, we need to execute the code first. Let's now execute the code. The file now exists. Come to the web browser and refresh this, and now we can see that we don't get this not found error, and the file doesn't now in fact exist. To show you on the server itself, let's come to the terminal, and this is then our document root, and we created the file with inside of the test directory, so we'll change directory to the test, and then we'll just list out everything here. Now you can see that we have the fopen.txt, and this 0 then states how many bytes of data is within inside of that file, and at the moment it says 0. Okay, so what I will do with the terminal is I'm going to create some data inside of that file, and then we'll show it and output it to you in the web browser. So this is some data within the file, this is another line of data. Alright, let's close this. Let's just LL again to show you now. See the difference here? It says 0 bytes of data, but now there's 65 bytes of data inside of this file. We come back to the web browser, refresh, and we see that it's just a text file, and it's outputting the data that's in the file. Now, like I said, is that when we use the W mode in fopen, it's going to open the file, truncate the file, place the pointer back to the beginning of the file again, and if the file does not exist, it's going to create it. Now, in this scenario, the file does exist, therefore it's going to truncate the file, place the pointer back to the beginning, and then allow us to start writing to the file. Now, we need to make one editation to our code, because at the beginning we're testing if the file does not exist. Well, now we know that the file does exist, so we want the code to execute as normal, because the file exists. So now if we come back to our web browser, go back to the file, refresh it, it still says the file now exists because the code has executed correctly, but this time we come back to our fopen.txt in the web browser, refresh it, and the data's gone. We come back over to the server. Now we knew that there was 65 bytes of data. List it again, and now we see that there's 0 bytes of data. So just to show you that if you do have data within that file and you needed that data and you write your code incorrectly, fopen is going to completely wipe out all of that data. Okay, so you need to make certain that you know which mode and when to use the mode and how to use the mode as well. Okay, because otherwise you're going to be losing data, whereas you might have wanted then to append data onto the end of the file. Therefore, you need to know which mode you are using. Okay. Essentially, another point on this as well is that fopen returns a file handle as already discussed. Now, if it does fail, it's going to return false. Therefore, placing this fclose down here is not going to be the correct type of argument, because it's going to be a Boolean argument, and fclose is expecting to have a file handle. Therefore, only call fclose on a file handle, alright, which you need to check to see whether you actually have a file handle first. Now, as long as you check that handle is true or is not false as such, so then we know that we have a file handle. Okay, that's essentially this tutorial done. Alright, in the next tutorial we'll extend this fopen even further to teach you actually how to write to the file using PHP. Okay, I hope you learned something. I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. If you liked this video, if you thought it was helpful, please give me a thumbs up. If you thought that there could be something different in it, please send me a message. Otherwise, yes, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.